Do you struggle with ideas of organised religion but still want to access the powers of prayer?
Our guest on this episode, Pixie Lighthorse, joins us to discuss the power of prayer. She is one of my favourite authors. She has written 8 amazing books and over 50 online courses. And she talks to us all about how to bring prayer into your life.
So on this podcast, you will learn how when you connect with nature, you're already deep in prayer.
How there's a surprising connection between the power of saying grace and your digestive system.
And we discuss how we are entering the era where we begin to understand that science will never have all the answers and how we can get comfortable with the unknowing.
So if you want to put the power of prayer into practice in your daily life, no matter what your belief system, this is the podcast episode for you. Welcome back to Wandering into Wellness, everyone. Finn and Lydia here as usual. And today we are joined by a very special guest, someone we have waited for so long to have on this podcast, Pixie Lighthorse. Pixie is the writer of the Prayers of Honouring series. She is the author of 8 books to date. She has created over 50 online educational courses. She has studied literature and Indigenous liberation and sovereignty at university level. And we have used her work multiple times with our clients in our workshops and both of us in our personal practice. So we are extremely excited and honoured to have you onto the podcast. Welcome, Pixie.
Thanks so much for having me. Glad to be here.
So we're going to just dive straight in. We wanted to have you on the podcast for so many reasons, but specifically because we are in the middle of shooting a series called Regenerative Rituals, and it's an online workshop and also a workshop we do in person. And we really wanted to have experts talk into the areas that we know a little bit about, but not, at a really, really high level like you do. And so we were talking to you specifically about prayer. And in your bio, you say that you wrote the series Prayers of Honouring to restore bonds between people and nature. In your experience, how connected is nature and prayer?
Well, in my experience, I'm having maybe a little bit of a different kind of experience than others in the sense that I relate very, in a very specific way to my culture, and my culture is an earth-based tradition, and so nature is everything to Native American people, and it informs our choices. It's our signs for our direction. The directions we're taking in life are found in nature, and so very close with that, as most Indigenous people are. So in the West, we have a separateness between the world of matter and the world of spirit. And in many cultures, that's not the case. So prayer is often begun as something that acknowledges the connection between matter and animals and plants and the sunshine and everything that's happening before you even get into prayer. So that's the air that we breathe, the sunshine that's growing our food, these kinds of gratitudes and things like that seem to be very connected to the process of prayer and the act of it. It's just, we are part of the natural world. And I notice in other religions and things like that, that's less acknowledged. But I also don't have a lot of experience with other spiritualities and religions, so I don't know.
Yeah, it's a fascinating thing.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we talk into a lot, isn't it? That thing of acknowledging the fact that we are nature rather than there's nature outside and then we're humans and those two things are a separate thing, right? And I think that's something that you seem to come up on talking about in your books and in your prayers a lot, that kind of acknowledgement that we don't just kind of live on the earth, but we are of the earth. And I think that's what's so beautiful in your writing, is that feeling of connectedness back into nature and back into earth, and feeling that we are that, like in this really lovely kind of embodied way. I think that's something we both really liked in your writings.
Yeah, the surrendering of rhythms to nature, I think, is the thing that I think I draw so much from your work with. I'm always kind of, I think animism is something that we have sort of there in Western culture, but it sort of came up, I don't know, a couple of centuries ago, and it sort of disappeared again and was like suppressed by this modern Western medicalized da-da-da mindset. So there's the potential there. Do you have an instinct as to why that was suppressed?
Well, I think that there was definitely something in it for the systems in operation to dissociate and disembody humans. There's what was happening at the time of a major religious movements, Christianity being one of them, is that a life, an afterlife that is out there, up there, over there, that is the promise that minimizes our experience and experiences of the flesh and things like that. I think that we've been living for a couple thousand years dissociated. Our spirit is up here and our body is down here, and we're not to give our bodies too much attention or credit or things like that, because it goes against what the religion prescribes. And so, you know, many people I write for and with, for example, the Franciscan priest Richard Rohr, who's done a lot of radicalizing of biblical texts and things like that. And really, I think in his particular work and many others, trying to bring much more of an embodied experience of, you know, Christ and the prophecies and things like that to be. So I feel like it's been touched off by time. It's not just a rebellious anti-religious movement that's taking place right now, but that it's been touched off by time that we need to be in our bodies and we want to be in our bodies, and it's not sinful or bad to be in our bodies. So we can bring our, you know, integrate our spirits and our bodies in a way, which obviously through things like yogic practice and things that are quite mainstream, we're getting the opportunity to do that, to harmonize that again, where they've just been sort of systematically separated for political reasons, for all of those kinds of things.
Yeah. Fun things, control things. Yeah.
I mean, as a yoga teacher, it's been such an interesting thing to experience how often I'm not enabled to teach yoga in establishments like schools, for example, unless we don't call it yoga and we call it something like animal movement practice or gentle stretching day or something like that, because of the fears that religious families have that there is some kind of dissonance between their religion and the yogic practice. And that's a really big fear, and it's a really big prevention for yoga and breath practices and mindfulness getting into schools and getting into children's lives specifically, which I think is a real shame, because I see the value massively in working in that area with children. And it's, again, like you were saying, it's that kind of embodiment. It's that being back in our body. It's that getting out of our thinking head and into the physicalness and checking in with, like, how am I feeling in this moment? How is my breath? What is it that my body needs right now? What are my emotions doing? How can I balance those things? And I think back to when I was a child, and if I had really had access to learning those tools then, how it would have changed the landscape of my life to have that so many decades earlier. And it's the religion that makes that barrier between bringing it to so many people because of this thing that you were just talking about that separation. So it's really interesting to see that. And I hope to see that change in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
I wanted to, don't mind. Oh, sorry.
Embodiment. Sorry, I just wanted to add, embodiment is dangerous to the establishment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, there's so many things to say about that.
That's like got to jump up into a lot, isn't it? Yes. The establishment of the idea of this notion of an us and them, I hate that it's emerged to the point where I can't ignore it. This sense that we have that there is a constant in a lot of the literature I read, all the podcasts I consume now, there is this them that we refer to, this them that is necessarily forces that aren't really working in our serving our interests as people who, you know, want to connect to others, want to make community, want to live independent, free-willed kind of lives. And I wish, and you hear actually some interesting people with some power out there, people like Joe Rogan talking about our future leaders should all have to take psilocybin before they ever go for election, in order that it kind of shocks them. I know, yeah, true, but shocks them out of their this kind of like this mindset, this kind of very, very rigid mindset about like what they need to do to control in order that the world stays a whatever safe place for them and for what they perceive to be the rest of us.
Right. Big shift. Big shift.
One of the things that I love about your books is the way they make this concept of prayer accessible to those of us who don't even have maybe a specific religion or faith. I wanted to just read a little bit about it from the intro of Prayers of Honoring Voice, if that's okay, and then just ask you some questions about that. So in the introduction, and this is the beautiful book, I don't know if you can see, Prayers of Honoring Voice, which is my favorite one. You say, this book is not one of personal empowerment. Rather, it supports relational empowerment. The healing that comes from saying what heals and helps, thoughtfully and directed toward the source most likely to be able to witness the contents of the heart. Relational empowerment in this application focuses on building. Personal empowerment may or may not build. It can be destructive, mean, retaliating, mired in the loop of right and wrong, withholding, punishing, victimizing, and even abusive. Prayer has the potential to open up channels with the divine source of life as you understand it, to begin a dialogue, which hopefully lead to many fulfilling dialogues in your relationships. That's beautiful. I feel like I'd like to read it like 3 or 4 more times just to make sure everyone allows it to land with them. But can you talk a little bit into what you mean by that and that difference between relational empowerment and personal empowerment and how that relates to prayer, and prayer lifts us up, even if we don't have religion and faith as our kind of core identity?
Yeah, I'll do my best. I think that relational and individual aren't mutually exclusive, right? We build a relationship with ourselves, with our minds, our hearts, our spirits, our bodies. We're constantly experiencing some form of relationship. And as within, so without, right? So out here, I am in a relationship with the earth as I walk to my vehicle or feed my livestock, or we're constantly in relationship. But I think that some of what we're unpacking and unprogramming and, sort of unfucking ourselves from is this idea that I'm here in my life in a container and you're over there and our movements don't impact each other, So relational is, if you are attending a ceremony, an indigenous ceremony here, which we have 574 federally recognized tribes and many more who don't sit in recognition. One of the first parts of a ceremony or prayer is we say, to all my relations. We call in our ancestors who we are building a relationship with. We are connecting with the earth under our bodies. Sort of like what I was saying before, there is a violence to being anti-relational. And so I don't feel like we're, as a humanity, struggling with that concept at this point. I think we really get it, that our relationships inform us. It's sort of like putting a spice in your pasta, they're talking to each other. Taking in your teas or plants, they're harmonizing, they're synergizing. There's a dialogue that's happening between our organs and nettles or something like that. It's much more than just something on top of something. A marriage, for example, in which person A marries person B and they, march through the protocols of what marriage is supposed to look like. There's also a great sort of feminizing of our experiences in relationships in the sense that we are becoming so much more at peace with what is not known, right? For a long time, many, many epochs, we have made science and what is known our God, right? And yet we exist inside of a universe that is 99.999% unknown. And so these controls and sort of more rigid Newtonian ideas of how we move are just starting to become more diffuse. And that's maybe not necessarily feminine from your perspective, but I see it that way as a mother and someone identified as a female, that there is womb-likeness We are connected to all of the umbilical cords, that ever came before us, through the vessels that we came through. And so relational is, it's just, this is how we do it, right? We're informing each other. We're impacting each other. My energy, my attitudes, my decisions inform and impact you. And this is a really important thing that we're getting to here, rather than seeing ourselves as living in little vacuums all over the place. That's not how it is.
I guess we see people as, when there's a struggle for freedom, that freedom is also a struggle for personal autonomy. And that struggle for personal autonomy doesn't really know necessarily where to end, because the autonomy is like, it's mixed up with power dynamics as well, isn't it? Because it's reclaiming your power, and that power at some point becomes a dominion, which becomes impactful on the world around you. But it's like how, like, even when you see it around, like, the problems we all have faced when we see, like, G7 summits or whatever, and we see, oh, the Chinese are the ones building all the coal plants now. I'm like, yes, but they didn't create all the stuff that we created, and they're responsible to, they're having to be responsible for all the mess that we've created, and not then go and have their own moment in the sun with their coal-fired power stations. It's a very difficult dynamic to hold, because none of us stand on the fence. Everyone is on a side of a line usually when it comes to that, I guess, and that's where maybe prayer comes into it.
Well, where does prayer come into it? I think it's interesting that most cultures have some kind of a prayer and connection practice, right? Communication with the divine. And so, to simplify, like, prayer and praying shows us where our challenges are. It shows us where our gratitudes are. It reveals our challenges. We drop into a space that is a little bit different from our usual day-to-day space in order to connect out loud to whomever's listening. Capital W, capital L, whoever's listening out there. And we express our awe and our fear and ask for some knowledge of a direction that will be helpful, right? And so, and to take us out of things like our judgment and our blame and our lack of grace and things like that. So, how we pray is as varied and as simple as how we make babies. All of this creation comes from the same place. And what's happening in the world at large, in current events and such, the people are very not okay with what is happening, all over the world. In the last 4 to 8 years, we've come to be in an entirely different world. And so what is the world that we live in now as the capital P people? Are we in prayer together? Yes, we are. We in my culture stay in our prayer for each other. We are holding each other in prayer. Not meaning we're praying for each other's outcomes, but while these big powers that be are making big impactful choices that are doing great harm to the people, we connect in a way that is in favor of humanity, in favor of people, and you do that on your continent, and I'm doing it on mine, and we are building a network of faith that the people will, prevail over some of these things. Yeah. And also in our own individual lives, even if we don't see the world through such a global lens, even in our day-to-day lives as we go to work and drive vehicles and do the things, our power coming from within and coming from relationality and connection in keeps us here, helping each other, fighting for each other, valuing each other, asking ourselves, what's really important here in this life? Because I think we were conditioned to think that a lot of things were really important that are proving not to be.
Yeah, big time. Yeah, that's powerful. So on that kind of point, can you see like a way or a time in the future where like people, like no matter our religious or cultural or political backgrounds, can come together like in devotional practice where there's like commonality of rites and rituals. And I know like the work that you do, interestingly, although it's informed by a different cultural or faith than I have grown up with, it resonates with me. So is there a way, do you see this as a spreading thing, like infectious in that positive way?
I mean, we're experiencing a beautiful counter contagion as I witness it from the terror of the global pandemic that we experienced. So the answer, the counter argument to that is in so many ways connecting to our ancestors wherever you are, because wherever you and your people are from, there are historical and ancient peoples pre-Christianity, pre-establishment, pre-monarchies. And we can connect with that straight through our DNA, if you love science, to remember, right? So we started out this conversation talking about being dissociated, seeing the spirit as a separate entity of our bodies. So if we want to talk about coming back into harmony in these bodies that we have here, then I think that it's fair to say that we can connect with a kind of technology that has protective factors built into it that our ancestors programmed us with. I don't want to sound too out of there, because for me, it's like really, it's really simple in that if someone had approached me on the street and said, how can I see the world in a way that is most helpful for me and my family and my people, I would say connect with your ancestors. Like, not just ancestry.com, find out everything about them, but like eat their foods, feel the way their bodies felt, get in the sun or the water, or collect the foods and the plants that they did. And I think that one of the reasons why this is so important is that it is connective. Your ancestors and my ancestors are not actually that inherently different. And when we are connected in that way as individuals, I think that it puts our selfness into a position of remembering. So something about what has happened in the last many centuries has dismembered us, fragmented us. Capitalism is one of the ways in which we can see that we had to stop being for ourselves and our families and leave our families and go to work for the establishment in order to play by their rules of currency, right? And that takes a lot of hours and life minutes and things away from us and our people and our families and our healing, and being their death side with someone who's passing over, or being there to birth the babies in a way that is ceremonial for that child's life, right? Now things are clinical and sterilized and mechanized, and we're totally unraveling that. And so I think that in this way, when we know that your ancestors birthed babies with midwifery and plants, and mine did too, well, then that helps us be the same, right? And so the idea isn't necessarily to go back to simpler times or things like that, but prayer helps us travel across time, and it also helps us to be present, be in stillness with the moment that is here, which is the only place joy lives, right? And to remember, put ourselves back together, more whole, our spirits with our bodies, and our hearts with our souls, and remember.
That's beautifully succinct. That really is beautifully succinct. You put it together so well. On that point, you talk about traveling one of the things that I love in your work, and one of the first things I think I came across from similar cultures to you and Native American cultures, was the use of the compass points in relation to spirituality, also this kind of wayfinding thing, this kind of beautiful allegory between internal and external movement. You use it a lot. I see it kind of through your, obviously through Prayers of Honoring Voice, it's there, north, south, east, west. Could you talk to us a little bit about that, and what, like, do those things have special significance for you when you're plotting out your work, or like, why are you hanging things on compass points and maps and things like that?
Well, here on this continent, we orient spiritual lessons to the medicine wheel, which is like a compass. So, for example, the doorways for our ceremonial housings and dwellings face the east, right? The direction of the rising sun. And every point, every direction has a sort of not universally agreed upon lessons. But again, because there are so many different tribes and nations, my people from the Southeast so-called United States have sort of a different orientation of lessons that come through. But yeah, it also just helps my brain orient to the sections of my writing. And you're right, it flows through every single book I've written. I write in that sort of fashion, so that we begin with breath, just like when we take our first breath of life, and then we move into activeness, being in our bodies, community. That would be the South for me, the fire, communities, the things that are important to us. The West is sort of like, for me and our medicine circle, where things get watery, things get emotional, and so we've come from this place of a new beginning. We've walked into sort of the heat and the fire and the germination and the growth of it. And now it's time to be reflective and to feel what it feels like to have been there and done those things. And then rounding out in the North is sort of like the seat where we have some knowledge about it. We have gained some wisdom through these experiences. And this can take place in a short period of time, throughout a day, through a calendar year, or through a lifetime. That compass is sort of always there for us, just spiraling in different layers. I feel like one of the things that I try to bring to readers is that, we forget, we love a new beginning. We love to start a new thing. We love to launch a project. We love to build a home. We love to have the babies, or, whatever it is that we're creating. And we love to get into it with our bodies and our hands and make sense of it and connect around it. And then right around that time when things start to get rough, we start to question, did I make the right choices, the wrong choices? How is it feeling? How it feels now informed by my past? We want to kind of like avoid that part,
Doesn't resonate at all.
I feel like it's more of a whole picture to go all the way around and through, and I really acknowledge the parts of our life journeys that are also, unwanted, undesirable. But even since I started writing in 2015, I started teaching in 2010, I started writing in 2015, so that was 9 years ago. So much has changed. There does not seem to be the levels of resistance around difficulty, emotion, discomfort, death. Something amazing is happening.
And it sounds like when you're talking there, it resonates a lot with teachings that we do around seasonality and living through the different seasons of your life, and how that also relates to the seasons of nature we see outside, and the lessons that you can take from nature in its different seasons in honoring the pathway of your own life. And it sounds like you're talking a little bit like spring, summer, autumn, winter there as well, along with those compass points. They feel like they kind of echo those things. Is it the case that you have you in your culture and you personally have specific prayers that honor different seasons, both externally in nature, but also seasons of your life, like the autumn and winter that you were kind of referring to there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's sort of highlighted in the book as it's divided into 4 sections. All of the prayers of honoring books are 28 prayers, which represents 28 different sort of points in life lessons. And there's 7 prayers for each of the sections, and they absolutely do coordinate with the seasons as well. And, you know, in the Northern Hemisphere, spring is the time when everything is in bloom and all of the baby animals are being born. And so, of course, there is that element of newness and sweetness and delicateness and welcoming, right? It's like when the sun rises in the morning, it's the same thing. We greet the day with that sort of gesture of, I'm here again, you know?
We all love a little baby lamb. We all love a little piglet.
Who doesn't? You know?
In honoring practice, which again is in prayers of honoring voice, you start the prayer with, thank you for this day of ritual devotion. Guide me to the mat, the trail, the teapot, the canvas, and the confrontation table today, so I may test my flexibility and stay true to my form all the way to my edge. Be my mirror, my educator in matters of discipline and rhythm. Open the shelter of my mind to constructive, caring feedback. I love that you reference daily things like a teapot or an art canvas or a mat, maybe that's like a sitting mat or a yoga mat, or the walking trail as places of prayer and ritual. Can you share with us some examples of how you bring prayer into your life, into those daily acts of living, so that people who are listening, who maybe don't have a practice of prayer and maybe haven't accessed your books yet, have a concept of what that might look like, how they can bring that ritual of prayer into their life?
Gosh, yeah. I mean, I don't know if my life is a great example of how to do prayer. I live in solitude on the edge of town, like the little old lady hermit who's just blending her tea, making her brew, But I will say that prayer and connecting with the divine for a long time has been relegated to the temple or, to have an intermediary there. And that's not how we do in connection with our spirits anymore. Maybe some folks do, but I think that what is happening, at least in the West, is that prayer is, we can drop in any moment at any time of day to be in dialogue with the divine. We no longer require an intermediary or a special cathedral with all of the candles lit to necessarily be in prayer, or we do not have to be in ceremony in the case of my version of spirituality to be in prayer. It's not relegated to just morning on your knees and at night on your knees. It's not just relegated to when you're in a crisis, right? It's a constant dialogue with the divine that is constantly unfolding. And so I am in prayer a lot throughout my day. Just being with Creator, being with the great mystery, weaving the things like working in my garden or healing an animal or trying to teach my teenager how to drive, like it's every prayer is available and accessible to us at any time. But I do believe that it was programmed in us in a certain way, and we absolutely have the basic birthright to recapitulate that, reformulate it in a way where we get to be connected as much as we want to be. So yeah, whether we're cleaning the toilets or moving the dog poo around to a different place, or the mystery is always present, and it is meaningful to us to know that we are supported by and heard by whomever listens.
Do you mind me asking, like, I don't know if you remember this or recall it, but the first time you really that crystallized for you, like that connection with divinity in daily life, was there something for you that kind of like made that compulsion grow? Like a singular moment or a particular point in life, or a person that did it to you, or what was it?
I mean, that is an interesting personal conversation and story. And I feel like everyone's is so valuable in how they come into being with the spirit. I had a couple of different accidents when I was an infant. And as I became an adult and gained more knowledge of those accidents, head injury and a car accident, and also fell into a river. And so as I have sort of like explored those events and maybe how that informed my life, I feel certain sensations. If you know anyone who's had a near-death experience, then sometimes they can remember a type of warmth or light that they experienced before they came back, to be in the land of the living. And I've had lots of experiences like that in my life. And it's unusual, I think, from the conversations that I have never had an argument or been at odds with the divine. So I haven't said, why me, God, because I don't know. I don't really know. And I don't know how important it is necessarily. But I was required to attend church, and I chose to as a little bitty child. And my grandparents were evangelicals. And so they would have us sing like This Little Light of Mine. I don't know if you know that.
Yeah.
On stage. And it was such a, particular house of worship at 5 years old was a place of joy for my heart and my spirit. And my grandparents were so celebratory and so proud of me and such. And so I don't know. I did not actually get raised in a religion, though. So I have probably had to unpack a lot less than many people are unpacking. I did not experience a spiritual or a religious trauma. And I think that sometimes that's where folks are coming from when they're coming back to prayer. Or many of my readers, as I've heard, have said, I've had a dysfunctional, unpleasant relationship with prayer because it was weaponized, used as a tool of manipulation earlier in my life. And so I abandoned it for a long time. And now I'm back and doing it in a new way. And it's giving me good feelings,
Is there like an architecture to prayer? For someone who hasn't experienced prayer in their life or has only experienced prayer in that way that, they would have gone to school and maybe they went to Catholic school or Christian school and there were prayers that were said that were repeated by rote and they had that sense of like, our Father God, and heaven hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. And like, you're looking around going, does anyone know what they're saying? They're just saying words. That was very much my experience. I remember just sitting in church day after day, watching everyone and just being like, no one's actually conscious of the words that they're saying. It means literally nothing to them. Maybe not no one, but most people were saying that. And so prayer for me was this very alien. I was just questioning constantly. I remember being so young and questioning that. Why? This means nothing. And I found your work. It was like, oh, this is a way that I can relate to prayer. This is how I can bring prayer into my life, and it sits with all my practices. It feels something in my heart. It gives me a structure. So I would advise and urge everyone to go and buy your books so that they have this. It's like a Bible, it's a way of having a prayer that you can just easily access. But if someone doesn't have it and then they're really inspired now, like how would they start sitting there at home now? How do they start to just pray? Is there a format? Is there an architecture? Is there some way markers that you can give them for how that might look?
I don't think so. I mean, I think that what is interesting about prayer and how diffuse our relationship with whomever is listening is that there is no wrong way to do it. It's of the heart. And that is not of the mind. The mind does want an architecture, a structure, right? Like a cadence, a poetry, just the right way to do it. And what we are learning is that we can do it whatever way serves us, Anne Lamott has a beautiful book called, I think it's called like Thanks, Help, Wow, or something like that. I'm going to get the title of it wrong, but it's basically like, there's the three prayers, right? Thanks, help, and wow. It's like, if the parking fairy fairies are kind to you and you feel gratitude in your heart, that's a prayer. You're putting a gratitude out in there for whatever is unfolding in your life. But in matters of health and humanity and things like that, you know, we pray what's on our hearts. And it's an evolution, I think, too, because, you know, we can pray for outcomes, which is, I think, very common. And we can also simply pray to feel held and for to be open, to be willing vessels for divine energy to come through us in whatever way whomever's listening would like. And acceptance is a big part of practicing acceptance is a big part of prayer for me too, because I'm not wants and needs based in my prayer. It's awe based, you know, gratitude based. And yes, where please show me, reveal to me some information, some knowledge about how to be with my challenges. You know, pretty simple.
With that in mind, and further to the prayer thing, further to that like specificity around prayer. So I grew up with like an agnostic father, but the only thing that he really fed me from a spirituality point of view, really, and they didn't force anything down my throat, was that he said, he's always like, I don't know how he said it to me, but he was like, and he was a man of few words, but he was like, he always kind of indoctrinated me with this notion that Native Americans had this way of honoring sacrifice when they you know, hunted, when they like had food particularly. And weirdly, one of the things that we've come around to in a lot of our education and in our like upcoming kind of workshop regenerative rituals is how the loss of saying grace, I think, is probably the most damaging thing to digestion that we've ever had, because it kills our connection to the food we're putting in our body. It, from it, whatever Western scientific mindset point of view, depletes stomach acid, depletes enzyme resources, all these sorts of things. And for me, that like recouping or recovering of this saying grace before food and acknowledging and honoring the sacrifice and all the energy gone into food is, I think, one of the most powerful things for human, because everything comes from there. That's where the food starts doing all the thing, and people can, I don't know. Anyway, I was wondering, do you have particular words that you apply around food? Food rituals are always interesting to me. Like when you say grace, do you have any sort of words around food consumption that you do, or consumption of things?
You know, I feel like, and I eat as well as I can, and sometimes I don't, right? Like the reality is not everything is going to be a beautiful platter of green and lush, amazing herbs and healing things. Sometimes it's a hot dog at Costco on the run, you know, it's just like, so when we take food into our bodies, it's important to know that like, may this nourish me in the best way possible with what I've got. I mean, many people do not have access to healthy food, whether they live in deserts, whether they are experiencing poverty. You know, I feel like food is fuel, and we have a very warped relationship with what counts as food. And for right now, that's okay. We're working on that, right? But here in our household, you know, we are blessing our food as we are making it, as we are laughing, as we are noticing its qualities, enjoying the pleasure of it, right? The flavors of it. When I'm making a meal here, my daughter will often run outside and gather, you know, the fresh mint or rosemary or thyme or things that grow in the garden, or bizarre things like that we've learned to cook here, like lamb's quarters, which grows, tons of it grow here, and we didn't know that we could eat it for a while. And when we discovered that we did, it feels like it's a roadside weed, right? But it's a bounty for us. And so I think that gratitude is one of the most simple of prayers. And whether we hold hands and say a grace, may this food nourish our bodies, we are grateful for the sacrifices that took place in order to bring this food to our table, I think that is a wonderful way to go about it. And it can also be super simple, you know, like I trust that this food is going to do its job inside my body and that my organs are going to, well, you know, receive it in a good way.
Yeah.
it's important to not be perfectionistic because we have to consider ourselves in context of the whole world, which is not well fed at times, or, or water. Water, for example, this is water from my well, which I trust, and it's clear and it's clean and it runs right out of my faucet into my glass. Right?
Hallelujah.
Literally amazing, because there's a lot of folks who do not have clean water, and their bodies may be accepting of the water that is available. But yeah, it's we make a relationship with water. Water is first medicine to my people, and so praying over water, letting water sit on the counter overnight and release whatever needs to be released from it. It's all prayer and all medicine.
I love that what your book to me anyway is like rejoicing in what you're talking about, imperfection, and like kind of celebrating the messiness of the humanity and allowing that to be unknowable, but also to kind of dance in the kind of curiosity of it, which I think is really lovely. You have a new book coming out, which is called The Wound is the Medicine.
The Wound Makes the Medicine was released in December.
Yeah. Tell us about that before we let you go, because I know you need to get out of here. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
We held you so long.
The Wound Makes the Medicine is another journey with the elements of fire, air, water, and earth, through the breakdown of personal relationships, sort of those crucible moments. If you've ever found yourself falling on the bathroom floor because of the thing that you can't control, whatever that is, that's what The Wound Makes the Medicine is for. It's sort of like the ultimate dagger in the heart. However you've experienced that in your life, it is remedies and remediations and affirmations and mantras and storytelling for the most difficult times in our life.
Wow.
Sounds so beautiful. Pixie, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us, for sharing all of your wisdom and your insights. And I know that everyone listening is going to be delighted to have this, and we will be pointing them towards all of your work and to follow you on all the channels, all the places that they can find you. Thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we will see you again in the future.
Yeah, that was really special. So thank you so much.
Thank you both so much too. And thank you for the work that you're doing to bring health and care and nurture to your audience. I really appreciate it.
Hey.
No, thank you.
Okay. Blessings. See you later. So if you, like us, learned a lot from that and you want to put more of these sorts of regenerative rituals into your daily life, we are about to launch our online workshop. And if you want to be one of the first people to get access to that, you can mail us now, get onto our website, thewanderinintowellnessproject.com. And that's where you'll find also the details how you can come and work with us one-to-one or two-to-one. Or if you want to bring the sort of daily health habits we've been talking about into your office life or into your corporate life, you can DM us also, send us an email, and we'll send you a full brochure, and we can bring a suite of health, nervous system support, we can bring immune system health support, we can help you with those, power of prayer types of practices, the things that are going to make you more intentional towards your work and outside your work life. And also, you can shop online on our website for the very last of our one-off, carefully curated, consciously crafted clothing collection, all made organic cotton, unorganic cotton, printed here in Bray, County Dublin, and made in collaboration with a Bulgarian artist. So I think that's about it. And come and watch our other videos, and you'll get lots and lots more. Like, subscribe. We want to see your comments on this one. Show us how you're putting the power of prayer into practice in your lives.
Bye.